Now, we haven't talked about the e-meter. It's their electrical device that they use in their auditing sessions.
Oh.
And when you're doing a professional auditing session, you're using this e-meter. I actually have one in my living room.
Okay. Can we see it?
Yeah, you want me to go grab it real quick?
Oh, I totally do. I want to see.
Okay. All right, I'll be right back. Hold on. Okay. So this is, Scientology has a new version. This is called the Mark 7. Unfortunately, we just recently accidentally broke the knob off of this thing, and I'm sorry, Cheryl, we're going to fix that. I promise. Okay. The most recent version of this meter in Scientology is called the Mark 8. This is the Mark 7. And I don't know if the battery is fully charged right now, but let's see if it is. Oh my, do we have enough juice? Looks like we might. Get the needle on the dial for you. Jackpot.
I am so intrigued.
Oh, I'm so intrigued.
All right. Okay, ignore the knob that I'm gonna take the knob off. It's broken.
No worries.
You got it.
Okay, so this is the e-meter. Okay.
Wow.
And these are the cans. These are the electrodes, the cans that you hold. And let me see. Okay, so if I'm the Scientology auditor, this e-meter is facing me. Okay. And if you're the one on the other side of the e-meter, you have one of these cans in each one of your hands.
Are they hollow?
Yeah, they're hollow. They're just tin, aluminum, or something like that.
Oh, okay.
They're just conductors, but you hold one in each hand. Okay. And I'm trying to do this without damaging things. And then those cans, you can see that each can is plugged in at the top, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's just this little connector goes right into the hole at the top there. Okay. And the cans come in different sizes so that they can be comfortable in your hands. Okay.
Oh my God.
How convenient.
And then the cans, they call them the leads. The leads connect to the cans and it plugs into the side of the e-meter. Okay. This e-meter is used in almost all Scientology auditing sessions.
Okay, so not to sound like too basic here, what's an auditing session?
Without the easiest way to describe it is just Scientology's version of one-on-one talk therapy, where we're sitting across a desk from each other. You're holding the cans. I'm asking you questions. You're giving me answers. Okay. And the auditor is using this meter to guide the conversation, the auditing session, and uses this meter to decide which subjects to take up in the auditing, and uses the needle movement of the e-meter to decide when to end that auditing, that portion of the auditing session and move on to the next portion, or when to end the auditing session altogether. So, like every auditing session has to end with the needle slowly moving back and forth, which they call a floating needle. And that indicates that the mental charge associated with that topic has been erased. And it looks, if I can jack up the sensitivity on this, where's the sensitivity? Okay. And bring the trim knob back on. So a floating needle might look something a little bit like this, where it kind of, I'm being a little jerky.
Is the purpose to, well, you said guide the conversation, but is it to make things less uncomfortable or more uncomfortable?
Or like, is it like a confession?
Find something?
An auditing session is supposed to basically, you're basically supposed to bring up uncomfortable things and then work through them.
Okay.
So the meter reacting a certain way is supposed to indicate that you're, the auditing, they actually have words for these things. It's biting. It's biting. It's you're getting into it. You're getting into it. And then, the needle will tighten up and the tone arm on the meter will go higher. And it's weird because the way L. Ron Hubbard says you should expect the meter to behave in an auditing session is also very much how the e-meter tends to behave in an auditing session. So, I mean, the e-meter certainly doesn't work for like L. Ron Hubbard. There's the way the meter works just electronically. And then there's the reasons L. Ron Hubbard gives for why it works that way, which gets into spiritual stuff and the magnetic field of the body and the electrical charge of mental pictures and all this stuff that I don't believe in any of that stuff at all. But it is interesting that the meter tends to behave throughout the duration of an auditing session the way L. Ron Hubbard says you should expect it to. And so the answer to your question of, is it supposed to be more comfortable or or less comfortable. You're supposed to eventually tackle things that are uncomfortable. And then at the end, the person getting the auditing feels more comfortable and happy and cheerful about whatever the topic of the auditing session was.
Okay. Is it like a confessional in the sense that, like, are people expected to go do auditing? Like, if I've done something bad, I need to go to an auditing session? Or is it like, I don't have any sins to confess and I still need an auditing session because there might be something that I need to get out?
Both.
Okay.
Auditing sessions can be done as a punishment to interrogate you for things you're doing wrong or trouble that you're making. Auditing sessions can be done just to unburden yourself, more like a straight up confessional, what you might think of, where you're just voluntarily, telling things. But most auditing is done to make you better, even after you've confessed to all the terrible shit you've done. So because the purpose of auditing and going up the levels is to basically become more and more of a superhuman being. Not just to confess all the terrible stuff that you've done. Having to confess all the terrible stuff you've done is considered sort of a lower level stuff that eventually you get out of the way so that you can get onto the main level stuff.
Interesting.
Gotcha.
So you said you never got to this level. You had to be at a certain level to use this?
Oh, that's why I mentioned the e-meter, because there's this phrase in Scientology that the staff members and the SEERG members use, which is like, we're on the business side of the e-meter. We're the ones who've decided to pull up our big boy pants and not be like, oh no, I'm the victim of my reactive mind. And we've sort of set our reactive minds to the side so that we can get down to the business of getting rid of all your reactive minds. And there's no prerequisite in Scientology to have finished these levels yourself before training other people on how to get through them and helping other people get through them. And also, auditing is very expensive. So people on staff, their job is to make as much money and sell as much auditing and deliver as many courses as possible. They don't really have the time and the luxury of usually doing the levels themselves.
Okay. And so auditing is part of the levels? Like, you have to do auditing to get to the next level?
I should have been clear about that. Going up the levels is going up the levels of auditing.
Oh, okay. So is it like you get this self-help course and a certain amount of auditing and then you go? Like, is there a little bit of both, or is it just the auditing does the levels?
It can be a little bit of both. So very rich public usually just spend the money and get all the auditing. Okay. People who aren't quite as rich will tend to do the training courses where you learn how to deliver the auditing and then they'll audit each other.
Oh, okay.
Most Scientology public are paying for the auditing. It takes a lot of time to do the auditor training levels. It takes a lot of time. Okay. And usually only staff members have time for that. And the staff members that are training on how to audit these levels are themselves usually not receiving the levels. It's very strange. It's very strange.
Okay.
Well, so this gets interesting, right? Because I mentioned earlier the state of clear, which is getting rid of your own reactive mind. Okay. That's about halfway up Scientology's bridge. And everything above that is confidential. Everything below that is not confidential. And so when we talk about getting rid of your own reactive mind, very, very quick explanation. L. Ron Hubbard says that you have your analytical thinking, reasoning mind, and you have your reactive mind. And the reactive mind is bad. Now, it used to serve a good purpose, but it no longer does. And it has all the recordings of anything that happened to you that involved pain and unconsciousness. So it's always bad things happening to you. And these recordings record everything that was said in those moments. And the words basically act like hypnotic commands against you subconsciously. And so the type of auditing that is designed to get rid of your reactive mind is having you go back to and recall these moments of pain and unconsciousness and recall the incident and go through it over and over and over again until it erases. And when you've erased all of your engrams and you've gotten rid of all your reactive mind, you're told you have achieved the state of clear. Now, the current way Scientology's auditing levels are set up is that there's a whole bunch of auditing that you have to do before you're even ready to tackle your reactive mind. And those are called the lower level grades. And these are just levels of auditing. And this is where Scientology is still very, very much self-helpy. And there's almost every ex-Scientologist who've done these levels will say something to you along the lines of, I thought the lower levels were great. because they really just tackle, honestly, real world stuff. And it might be bullshit. And the auditing process might be sort of pseudoscientific. The principles that underlie it, all the principles L. Ron Hubbard came up with, could be total bullshit. But people, for the most part, will still tell you, I thought the lower levels helped me a lot, right? Okay. And so those auditing subjects are going to deal first with just memory, just being able to get used to being able to recall things with confidence. And then the next level will be about problems, being comfortable confronting and looking at your problems. And then the next level, auditing level, will be about transgressions. So all the bad stuff you've done that you don't want people to know about. Okay. And then the third auditing level will be about the subject of change. People don't like change. And so just confronting the reasons why you don't like change. And then the fourth auditing level would be, or the next one would be about fixed conditions and looking at things that you do in your own life to keep yourself in fixed conditions because you're trying to be right. And if you change that, you'd have to admit that you were wrong and all sorts of stuff like that. Okay. Once you've done those levels, you're ready to tackle the reactive mind.
Before we get into the reactive mind, I have a question real quick about these lower levels. If you're confessing all the horrible things or the things that you're doing and you're talking through, so basically you're having like therapy sessions, right? And you're doing that, are they keeping track of that, or are you being punished for the things that you share with them? Or are these just staff people on the other side not caring what you say?
If you're telling bad things that you've done and it's in the context of a normal auditing session, you are not supposed to get in trouble for anything that you say.
Okay.
But if the auditing session is being done because you're in trouble and they want to get down to the stuff that you're doing, you are told, like, the auditing session looks the same, it sounds the same, it's structured the same, the procedure is the same. But in the beginning of the auditing session, the auditor says, I'm not auditing you. And what that means is everything you say is going to be used against you. But you do not have the Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate yourself.
Okay, gotcha.
Wow.
Okay. So for the most part, not for punishment unless it's meant specifically for punishment.
Exactly. And most staff members auditing is for punishment.
Gotcha. Because they're not paying for the auditing to just help them feel better and do better.
That's right.
And be better.
That's
They're
right.
getting audited because they, as a lie detector.
That's right. So I've had a ton of auditing, but I've done none of Scientology's levels.
Okay. I see.
Okay.
So once you achieve the state of clear, you're told you have now gotten rid of your own reactive mind. Congratulations. This is when Scientology hits you with the confidential stuff. And this is where the funny stuff you would have heard on South Park or really anywhere else comes into play. Because what L. Ron Hubbard says, you find out that you, as a being who occupies a body, you got to Earth relatively recently. But 76 million years ago, there was this galactic dictator of the Galactic Confederacy named Xenu. And he decided his planets were overpopulated. And so he called about half the population in for tax audits. By the way, this is why L. Ron Hubbard hates the IRS. Or I should say, I think L. Ron Hubbard came up with this story because he hates the IRS. Right. Okay. Xenu called half the population in for tax audits. And when they showed up, he had them frozen in glycol. I don't know why glycol, but he had them frozen in glycol. He loaded them up onto DC-8 space planes, and he had them shipped to Earth and dropped into volcanoes and blown up with hydrogen bombs. Yeah. And this was a huge recording in their reactive mind.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. That's so specific.
It's so specific. Okay. Scientology, the word they use for the spirit is Thetan. 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 Okay. So I'm a Thetan. You're a Thetan. Everyone's a Thetan.
Sounds awfully close to Satan, but okay.
It sounds exactly like Satan with a lisp, right? You were told that you, as a relatively aware Thetan who's capable of occupying and animating your own body, you came to Earth more recently. He doesn't even bother to explain how we more capable Thetans got here. But these other beings that were brought here by Xenu 75 million years ago, they got so screwed up from being blown up in these bombs in these volcanoes that they have no idea who they are. They have no idea where they are. They've just been blown in the wind for 75 million years. And they are so sick. They are like half dead. You can't kill a Thetan, but they're like as close to being dead as a Thetan can get. And you have tens of thousands of these, he calls them body Thetans or BTs. You have tens of thousands of these sick, diseased, crazy, alien spirits stuck to your body. And congratulations, you just got rid of your own reactive mind. You now have to get rid of all of their reactive minds because they're making you sick. They're making you, they're the source of all your fears, your anxieties, your sicknesses, your cancers, your pains, everything. Your body thetans are projecting their reactive mind onto you, and you have to get rid of them.
Wow.
Whew.
And the way that you get rid of them is you spend the next 10 or 15 years, 6 times a day, going into a locked room by yourself, hooking yourself up to this e-meter and telepathically communicating with those beings, trying to doing a quick little procedure L. Ron Hubbard came up with. And you as a Scientologist have convinced yourself that you are telepathically speaking to these sick beings, and you're getting rid of their reactive minds so that they can get off of your body and go pick up a normal body of their own and grow up as a nice, normal, productive, sane person, since you just cleared them using Scientology.
Oh my gosh. Wait, did you say 6 times a day?
6 times a day. You audit yourself. The sessions can last about 10 or 15 minutes.
Holy cow.
Well, I got no comparisons for you. That's just, I'm like, the other ones, I'm like, oh, well, everyone's a little crazy. And I'm like, no, I think you guys are, the needle's going to the W here. You got it.
Wow.
That's wow.
And so it's funny because a lot of people in popular culture, I think Xenu is sometimes referred to as an overlord.
Okay.
And L. Ron Hubbard might have used that word. In reality, he was a politician. He's a bad guy. So because this word overlord gets used with Xenu, a lot of people just casually think Scientologists worship this space alien Xenu. And you go, no. He's a bad guy in the Scientology mythology.
Okay.
The Xenu story is just the explanation for where all of these tens or hundreds of thousands of sick beings came from that are stuck to you. And all of Scientology's upper confidential levels are telepathically finding and curing and getting these beings to leave your body and pick up a body of their own.
Wow.
Interesting.
So you work on becoming so clear and mentally capable that you realize that you can come to this earth fully conscious and you know exactly what's going on, but yet you choose to come back to help all of your other, all the rest of humankind, to also teach them about Scientology. Yet, from what I'm hearing here, in order to do anything or accomplish any of these levels, it's all about paying your way into it. It's all about money. You can only do it if you give them lots of money. But yet you're just coming to help them. Oh, okay, let me help you. Now give me all your money and I'll do it for you, right?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to get to the top of Scientology's bridge. Jeez. And then you're told, well, I guess you can get the next levels once all the Scientology orgs reach a certain size. Good luck.
Wow. Okay, so you get to level 5. You said there's 8 levels, right?
So the levels have numbers below clear and the levels have numbers above clear. So above clear, you have what they call the operating thetan levels, or OT levels. And they go from 1 to 8. 1 to 8 is what you can pay for and do, and the others don't exist.
Okay.
Those are the ones that might, could come to pass if everyone if the orgs grew and everyone was, it's so hard for me not to use our terminology. I'm like, if everyone was more righteous and, brought more people into the fold, then they would be able to have the blessings of the next levels. That's how we would say it.
That's right. And what's interesting is that, when I said, Scientologists kind of want to get at least half the planet into Scientology and up to the state of clear. Mm-hmm. When you're doing Scientology's upper confidential levels, it's almost a hack. It's almost a loophole in how to make a lot of clears. It's kind of like, I think, your analogy of baptizing the dead. Mm-hmm. Because when you're telepathically exorcising these alien souls from your body, you're told that you are clearing them. So that being, that body thetan, may not identify as a Scientologist, but whether they know it or not, they no longer have a reactive mind because you've just gotten rid of their reactive mind. They're going to now go pick up a body. They're going to grow up as a cleared individual, even though they may not identify as a Scientologist.
So you're still continuing to save thousands of souls or thetans, even just by accomplishing what you need to be able to be exalted.
See, there you go.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
even found a comparison
We even
with
found
that.
a comparison. I know for a second there, I was like, I don't know about this one. Like everything else I've been able to, but that took me. Yeah, that's true. It was a little bit of a
Now,
stretch.
this is when I said by the end of L. Ron Hubbard's life, he most definitely believed his own BS, because one of the gentlemen who was with Hubbard until the end of his life was a man named Sarge. Sarge was his nickname. I think his name was Steve Fouth. And he was sort of like L. Ron Hubbard's handyman. And Hubbard had become infatuated, like almost like a paranoid schizophrenic, infatuated with getting rid of his body thetans. Like every time he thought he got rid of his body thetans, he would find more. And he'd be, it's almost like he was being haunted by his own body thetans. And so he asked Sarge to rig up a high voltage version of the e-meter that he could use, and that had a sufficient shock that it would get all the body thetans off of his body and kill him at the same time.
Wow.
So that he could move on to his next level of research without being harassed by these body thetans. So that, when I say there's no question he believed his own BS, whether it started out that way or not in the beginning, by the end, even the people closest to him who then subsequently left Scientology, these are the stories that they had to tell, that yes, he believed in these body thetans. He believed in these upper levels.
Wow. Do you normally get shocked by the e-meter?
No. I mean, the battery on this, you could turn this thing all the way up to its highest level. You don't even feel it.
Yeah. Okay, just checking. I was like, wait a minute. Maybe I don't want to try this for funsies.
Well, one of the questions we had for you as well is, we watched the first introductory video to Scientology, and it kept showing the symbol that looks kind of like a
cross.
It looks like a cross between a cross and a star almost. Can you explain what that means, or what it's supposed to mean?
Totally. Two answers to this question. Let's have the first question be, why does Scientology use a cross? There is no reason other than to give people the impression it has something to do with normal traditional religion or Christianity.
Oh, okay.
The cross has zero meaning in Scientology.
Okay.
The next question would be, why does the Scientology cross have 8 points? Mm-hmm. And that is because of the 8 dynamics that we discussed earlier.
That was my guess.
It could be an 8-pointed star. It could be an 8 but the only reason they're using a cross is to be like, oh, look, we're a religion.
But yet they don't want to be a religion. But yet they do for tax purposes. Oh,
you do want for tax purposes.
These days, they definitely want to be a religion.
Okay.
Back in the early days, even L. Ron Hubbard's lectures and books, he shits all over religion. But then he was like, oh, wait, oops, that's a mistake. We're with those guys. We changed our mind. We're religious.
Those tax benefits can be awfully enticing. That's for sure.
Yeah, interesting. Right. Okay, so the 8 points, I understand that. And the cross is meant to look like a cross in some sense then.
Yes.
That's on purpose.
Now, here's what's interesting. There's really 2 different Scientology symbols. The cross is one of the Scientology symbols, but that's not even the symbol Scientologists use the most to represent Scientology. The other one is called the S and double triangle. And does that ring any bells? Have you seen something that looks like that?
I don't know. I don't think so.
If you just Google a Scientology symbol, you'll probably get the S and double triangle even before you get the cross. Let me see. Scientology symbol. Yeah, you get the S and double triangle and you get the cross.
Okay.
S and double triangle is the real Scientology symbol.
Okay. What do the double triangles represent?
So the bottom triangle represents affinity, reality, and communication, which together are supposed to make understanding. And then the top triangle, the 3 corners represent knowledge, responsibility, and control. Okay. KRC. ARC and KRC.
Okay.
And those are 2 fundamental concepts in Scientology.
Okay. Well, Aaron, I have to ask now, like, obviously you are very well versed, know all the stuff. You were in the Sea Org. You had signed your billion years. You were on the other side of the auditing as a staff member, right? And how long were you in, and what did it take for you to say, I don't think this is right?
So I was in for 30 years, from 4 to 34. And I'm 44 now. And because there isn't just one answer. It's a series of things. And it's funny because there was one I had spent so much of my life doing Scientology training that technically I didn't have to pay for. I was paying for it with my time, but not with my money. And I had spent so much of my life training others on Scientology. But again, it was my job, right? That at one time when I was in the Sea Org in Los Angeles, and I was over the entire training and auditing area, I remember waiting for everyone to get out of course. I was waiting in the hallway. I was going to give everyone a big rah-rah briefing of something we needed them all to do. And I remember standing there being like, if I wasn't a Sea Org member and I wasn't a staff member and this wasn't my job and I didn't have to be here doing this, and if I was in the shoes of these public people who are literally here paying for the privilege of doing Scientology, if I was in their shoes, would I ever pay a single dollar or spend even a minute of my time coming in here to do this shit? I was like, no, I wouldn't. You might have been like, wow, that must have been an eye-opening moment. You must have left shortly thereafter. I was like, no, I stayed in the Sea Org for years more. Like, it was just one of these things of this inertia of having been there for so long and doing it for so long that it didn't really occur to me that not doing it was even an option.
Okay, interesting.
And yet still at that time in Los Angeles, just the experience of being a Sea Org member out there just got to be so kind of a soul crushing experience. Like in Scientology, Hubbard has this management system, this statistical management system set up where the only reason numbers could be bad is because you have evil people intentionally working on destroying things. And like he goes, statistics they don't just go low. They're pushed low. Statistics don't just go down. They're pushed down. Now, this is a bit of a problem for a shrinking organization because no one in the organization is allowed to admit that it is shrinking. Nobody at the top will acknowledge that it is shrinking. And yet statistics are hard to get up. And so there's this constant witch hunt for who among the staff is the suppressive person that's pushing stats down.
Okay.
And so life is just a battle of either looking for the bad guy or being accused of being the bad guy. That it's just eventually I was like, dude, I got better ways to spend I got better things to do with my time.
Yeah.
So, and also when you're in the Sea Org, you're not allowed to have children. So if you get pregnant, if your Sea Org spouse gets pregnant, you're pressured to get an abortion, but otherwise you have to leave the Sea Org. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my word.
Are you allowed to be married?
Only to another Sea Org member.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say Scientology is the only so-called religion that has a weekly bus taking its clergy members to the abortion clinic.
Jeez.
Oh my word. Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yikes. So you working full-time for the Sea Org or for the organization, and so everything you owned was given to you by the organization?
Yep, exactly. I mean, you're literally living in their you're living in dormitories in their building, you're working in their building, you wear the uniforms provided by them, you're eating in the cafeteria, food provided by them. Your whole existence is Scientology.
So did you meet and fall in love with someone there? And you did. Okay. So it wasn't arranged?
No, there's no arranged marriages. No.
Okay. You never know. Coming from where I came from, that was a big part of it. Yeah, big part of it is because you said it had to be someone within. So I just didn't know if they said, hey, here's someone within, maybe marry her.
Yeah. No, they don't arrange it. And pickings are slim. So when some new blood comes into the dating pool, people get snatched up pretty quick.
Why wouldn't they want Sea Org babies?
Because the babies are just a distraction. I mean, Sea Org members work like 110 hours a week, and it's you used to be able to have kids in the Sea Org. That's where you got Jenna Miscavige's story of growing up as a child with Sea Org parents and signing the Sea Org contract. Those organizations where they would stick the children of Sea Org members were called the cadet organizations, and there was a couple ranches in California where the children of Sea Org members would go. That's where you get stories like Jenna Miscavige's.
Okay.
That's when you were still allowed to have kids in the Sea Org. They got rid of that a long time ago. And it's good in the sense that is the worst place you could possibly raise a child. But it's also weird in that, we spoke about earlier about Scientology families are small. I mean, not only are Scientology families small, but,
they're being discouraged.
They're literally kicking people out of their so-called clergy for having kids, and they want you to have an abortion instead.
Jeez.
Oh man, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Well, and as a parent, I can't imagine like Jana's story. I think I remember hearing she barely saw her parents at all because they would send her to this ranch and go back to work. I can't imagine as a parent having to deal with that.
Exactly. I mean, I can't imagine as a parent ever agreeing to that, but
Mm-hmm.
I guess walk a mile in a person's shoes, right? But I can tell you, my kids were never raised in Scientology.
Yeah.
Okay, so in 2006, me and my wife basically were like, we don't want to do this anymore, and she got pregnant, and we left the Sea Org, and we moved to Clearwater, Florida, with her family, who are Scientologists. And then in 2009, the local newspaper, it was called the St. Pete Times. Now it's called the Tampa Bay Times. They ran a giant expose featuring a whole bunch of former Scientology international executives who had been famous names in Scientology.
Hmm.
And I didn't know these people had left the Sea Organization, much less had left Scientology. And they all started speaking out about what it was like working directly under David Miscavige at Scientology's international management base. And it basically, their stories of what their experience was like caused me to just literally reevaluate everything I had thought to be true.
Wow.
I thought the reason things were so crappy in Los Angeles was because we were too far away from David Miscavige, and that the closer you got to David Miscavige, the better it would be, because Scientology is supposed to be the tool, the tools to handle everything. When you get to the top of the bridge, you're supposed to basically be a hyper intelligent, hyper emotionally aware, competent super being. I couldn't imagine, I thought it was like it would be a utopia at Scientology's management base.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was the opposite. The closer you got to David Miscavige, the more horrific things were. I mean, even to the point where he literally constructed a physical, literal prison on the grounds of the international management base, and basically had 200 of Scientology's top managers, imprisoned in this thing. It was basically just a modern day gulag in Hemet, California, in the United States.
Oh my word.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. So you were allowed to leave, you and your wife were allowed to leave the Sea Org and stay members and stay just like active Scientologists.
Yep.
But then from there, what happens when you decide, so you see this expose and you're finding out what's going on?
Yeah.
What is it like trying to actually leave the group as a whole?
Well, because everything I had ever known was Scientology, and both mine and Heather's employers were Scientologists, and all our kids' friends were Scientology kids. And even when I no longer believed, and I was like, oh wow, it's all just bullshit, I just thought I was basically secretly in touch with all of these former Scientology executives, right? I was secretly in touch with these people who, if Scientology knew I was in touch with them, I would be kicked out. And just, due to the mental conditioning that you're under, it never really occurred to me that I should just up and be like, okay, I'm out. I'm like, no, I just thought I could continue to be like a secret Scientologist, not Scientologist, for, the rest of my life. Like, you just didn't put a lot of thought into it, really. But I would be more and more careless as time went on about who I sort of kind of dropped a hint to. And the story, sorry. Hold on.
No, you're fine. Take your time.
All the details of exactly how I went from just kind of reconsidering or reevaluating everything that I had believed up until that point, to all of us actually being out of Scientology, and how all that went is very, very hard for me to discuss. And in the beginning, when I said I didn't want to dive into it, it was just because it's too exhausting and emotional to do it. And I know that's not really what you're asking, but it is very, very difficult to discuss. How all the families get destroyed, and how, family members are forced to decide which children and which grandchildren they're never going to see again. And, even my kids' grandparents on their mom's side live a couple miles from us. And my 3 daughters haven't seen their grandparents since 2014, for 10 years.
Wow.
And then their grandfather died. And they might have been able to see him once before he died. But that was only because one family member who's not really a Scientologist finally decided to tell us that, their grandfather was about to die in the hospital. And even though he'd been dying for 2 years, nobody bothered to tell us or anything like that. So, yeah. So, I'll try to give you the nutshell version of this, where basically, one of these former executives, who had been one of the most famous Scientology managers in the world, she sent out an email to every Scientologist in the world one New Year's Eve, basically saying L. Ron Hubbard is great, Scientology is great, but David Miscavige is ruining everything and don't support him anymore. Wow. This was a earth-shattering event in Scientology. So then my mom, this is like, a nutshell version. My mom got kicked out of Scientology officially for essentially sharing that email with people. And so then I was supposed to sever all ties with my mom. And I basically lied about that for 2 years and said that I had, but I hadn't really. And I was never going to. And, Scientologists have a bit of a snitching, not a bit, like a snitching culture is the Scientology culture. So we never told our daughters that they weren't allowed to see their grandmother or that they weren't allowed to talk about it, because they were like really young. I mean, so this is 10 years ago. So they were like 8, 6, and 4. And we never told them anything like, hey, you can't tell anyone that you see your grandma. But our girl's nanny, was a Scientology staff member who we also hired to be our nanny. And Scientology wanted to know if I was still secretly in touch with my mom. So like our girl's nanny would basically ask them if they were seeing their grandma. And they didn't know that they weren't supposed to say this, right? So Scientology is basically spying on us by using our nanny to question our young girls.
Sheesh.
And so eventually they're like, all right, Aaron's just going to keep lying to us about this. And they also started to have a pretty good idea that I was secretly in touch with all these former executives. They had all the evidence that they needed, but I never admitted that to them, but they didn't. Eventually they had all the evidence they needed. So then they kick me out, and then they go to Heather and say, well, you've got to divorce Aaron or you're going to be kicked out. And she said, well, that's not going to happen. And they said, okay, well then you're kicked out. And then they go to her parents. And her 2 sisters and her brother and all of their kids. And they say, well, specifically to her parents, they say, well, you've got to disconnect from Heather and the girls. And I say that this is where you get to a point where you're really not at liberty to honestly claim you're making your own decisions at this point. Because at that point, her parents are like, well, we have 4 kids. And no matter what decision we make, we're going to lose some children and some grandchildren.
Yeah.
If we stand on principle and say, no one tells us to disconnect from our kids, then they keep 1 child and 3 grandchildren, and they lose 3 children and many more grandchildren. And if they do what Scientology wants, then they lose their oldest daughter and their 3 granddaughters. There's no winning at that point. And that is why I call Scientology a family destroying human trafficking cult. It's one of the reasons Scientology is such a failing organization. Not only is there no incentive to have children, they actively destroy families for no good reason. So my mom wasn't out there talking to the press or doing TV shows or documentaries or writing books. All she was doing was sharing information with other Scientologists about David Miscavige. Now, of course, in a Scientology context, that's terrible. But she wasn't like actively out there destroying Scientology publicly, right? That was the first domino to fall. And then my only sin was being connected to my mom and just talking to some of these former Scientology executives. I wasn't out there speaking to the press, writing books, being in TV shows, being in documentaries. And then my wife's only sin was not divorcing me. So she wasn't even talking to these former executives. And then my kids had no sin at all, right? And so it's like they actively, and even during some of this process, even when they were trying to force me to disconnect from my mom, after I was caught lying the first time, I said to them, guys, look, this doesn't even make sense. You know, if you make me disconnect from her, you're going to turn her into an enemy who will be out there publicly attacking Scientology. Mm-hmm. I'm like, why make an enemy out of someone who right now isn't one? And like, yeah, we don't care. The fact that they just go out of their way to destroy families, I'm going to say for no good reason. I don't mean to imply that there ever would be a good reason. They go out of their way to make enemies about people who just want to go away. Is honestly one of the reasons I'm so dedicated to helping bring down this organization and try to upload content every single day. Is like, I've seen behind the curtain. I've seen how incompetent the organization is. I've seen how small it is. I've seen how paranoid it is. And I've seen how they will needlessly and ruthlessly and cruelly destroy people's lives. And I go, you know what? The least I can do is try to hurt you guys as much as you've hurt people. Try to hurt the organization as much as the organization has hurt people. We haven't even gotten into all of it, but that's probably as much as I can.
No. Thank you for even being willing to share what you did. I'm gonna start. It's sad, and it's similar for Sam's family because the FLDS warned Jeff Sroop's families apart. You know, he says that it's in the name of God and what God wants. But it made me extra emotional when you're talking about your kids and how they don't have a crime. Because our kids have never gotten to meet Sam's mom. I've never gotten to meet Sam's mom, you know, and it's because she's staying true to what she believes and who she believes the prophet is and what she thinks God wants of her. And the fact that their prophet says that what God wants of her is to like never meet his family, you know, like never have a relationship with him anymore. And as his wife too, and not being raised in the FLDS, it's like heartbreaking because to him, like, she's written us letters before and she's just so sad and disappointed. But I know that I married this like amazing man and we have an awesome family and 2 beautiful kids that like she's never going to get to meet or know or be a part of, like how wonderful they are and how wonderful he is, all because it's all through that view of having to remain in the church. And just like you were saying with your mother-in-law, like picking between children, right? Like she has kids who are still in the church. And so when you're the one to leave, you kind of are or I know in your case, you're kicked out, like, you know, they forced you, but in Sam's case, he chose to leave because he wanted to have a better life and to be able to make choices for himself. And it's just sad to see the repercussions of where if you're the one who leaves, then it has to kind of be on your shoulders of like, oh, well, you know, you're the one who left. If you would just come back, and them not being able to see fully like the whole picture and see that, you know, God wouldn't want families separated and torn apart and wouldn't want you to be apart from any of your grandchildren, you know? And so my heart just goes out to you even more because sadly, we experience something similar in that aspect. Or Sam, even more than me. I'll let you speak to yourself.
Well, yeah, no, it's interesting. Sometimes when I share my story, people almost wonder if I don't care, because I try to just skim the surface, gloss over it, and don't really allow myself to get that deep into my feelings of how hurtful it has been to not have that relationship with family. And also a piece of me feeling guilty because I made the choice to leave my family, knowing that when doing so, I wouldn't be able to have that relationship, because I had been a part of the FLDS church when other family members had left. And we looked at them as these wicked people that were choosing Satan over staying true to God's plan and the prophet and all of that. So it's very hard to talk about. It is, and it's very hurtful. But like I say, and like you mentioned, Aaron, it's not something that I like to talk about very much. And when I do, I say, yeah, I left the church, and because of that, I was disowned from my family, and that's about as deep as I generally go.
Because of how
But
hard it is.
because of how hard it is,
I try to as well. I try to just bounce off the surface if I can. Depends on the interview.
yeah.
Yeah.
But when you do take that moment to actually feel, ugh, yeah. It's rough, and it's hard. It's hard to do it. It's hard to express how difficult.
I have a question about this. Kind of from a compare and contrast perspective of the Scientology belief that we talked about earlier of we're all beings who are about 67 trillion years old, and we are not our bodies. And that this idea that we're all beings is used to devalue the family unit by saying, if you have a daughter, that's not really your daughter. It's just your body was you shared genetic material, but that's irrelevant because you're not your body. And that you can't give birth to a Thetan. Thetans don't give birth to other Thetans. It's just these meat bodies give birth to new meat bodies that are then occupied by Thetans that are already pre-existing. And so that the idea of a family relationship is almost a social construct. Wow. And it's almost an aberrated social construct. It's not real. It doesn't have any significance. And so, this is literally how this is the information and the belief that Scientology uses to devalue the family unit, so that when they are forcing family members to disconnect, and it is forcing, Scientology would argue, oh, you had the choice to leave. It's like, yes, and also lose everyone else. Like it's this is the belief that they use to devalue the family unit to justify disconnection, that it's not really your sibling or your parent or your child. That's WOG think. WOG is the word. Scientology, the word WOG means non-Scientologist. Okay. It's like in Harry Potter, the word muggle. Muggle means like non-wizard, right?
Yeah.
So like there's the Scientology way of thinking, and then there's the WOG way of thinking. And the WOG way of thinking is considered like dirty and lowly and unenlightened. And so people are like, oh my God, that's my son. Is like, that's WOG think. Only a WOG would say something like that. They're really their own being. They made their own choice, and they knew what they were doing, and they made the rules. And there's always next lifetime anyway. And they know what to do to get back into good standing with Scientology.
That's 100%.
When talking about comparing it, it's not, I mean, WOG would be worldly in the Gentile, worldly in the FLDS, that's the world and the bad way of thinking. But I mean, they do talk about the importance of family, but they put the importance of family in the next life. Like, we have to do all of these things so that we can be together in the next life, right? So it's a lot less focus on what is important in this life, and actually having that good family connection and all of these happiness and joy that you can have in this life. It's less about that and more about, hey, if you suffer, if you do this, this, and this, and put up with all of these things that are required of you, then you can be happy in the next life.
Well, and they believe in the separation of family in the next life. And like within the mainstream Mormon church, you hear a lot of emphasis on the temple of sealing together families for eternity, right? So you'll hear people say, well, families are forever. And isn't that so beautiful? And that aspect is, but they never really talk about the fact that if you believe that a certain group of families who are sealed in the temple are going to be together forever, it means that you believe that God's going to separate the families who aren't. And so there is that eternal separation. And that's why when like family members, I think you said they call them disconnected, but like, you know, in the FLDS or mainstream LDS church, like when we left the church, it's why we luckily still get to have regular familial relationships with our family that are still in the church, but their hearts break on like this level of like in the eternities, we will be separated for the rest of forever. So we get to have, and they'll like cherish the relationship now, but there's this deep, deep sadness of disappointment in us because, you know, we're ruining our eternal family. We get to be with them, our children right now, but not forever, like what they get to be with theirs. And so it's this constant like sadness either way of if you don't agree with everything and you don't believe it, like eventually they put all this purpose into family and how great family is here. But then your punishment is you're not going to have them in the next life unless you follow all the rules.
Wow.
And do all the things. And so, yeah, and then the FLDS, obviously here on this earth, they're also separating families, right? And so I don't know.
So would Scientologists ever try to get people back in the church that leave, or once you leave, they want nothing to do with you?
So they're not supposed to, meaning when you're officially kicked out, you're told there's only one person in the Scientology hierarchy who's allowed to have any contact with you whatsoever. And that's a guy called the International Justice Chief. And he's a Sea Organization member. No one else is supposed to be secretly talking to you, trying to convince you to come back. It happens, especially if you just accidentally run into somebody. Hey, man, I really hope you get it. Stuff worked out and, you know, get yourself handled and all that kind of stuff. But they're not supposed to. Because them being in touch with you would give you an opportunity to try to convince them to leave.
Right. That's FLDS thinking right there. Whereas the mainstream LDS church is more about try to be welcoming and invite them back to church.
If we keep loving, if they can just keep loving us and like invite us to still have this familial relationship, then there's always a chance that we'll go back to it. And that's the goal. So that's the mainstream. And then the FLDS, once you leave and you become, so someone who's never been in the church is considered a Gentile and they're better off. But once you leave the truth, you're considered an apostate.
Yeah.
And being an apostate, especially within the FLDS, the mainstream church doesn't talk about apostates the same way because there's always that hope and there's the millennium, you know. But in the FLDS, it's like once you're an apostate, like Sam is way worse off. Like his mother has to fear for his eternity way more because once you know the truth, if you leave the truth and you deny it, you will be sent off to outer darkness, which is like worse than it's the equivalent of hell, but it's, I don't know, within Mormon theology, they don't talk about hell. They talk about outer darkness. And like even murderers are going to go to what's considered the telestial kingdom, which is the lowest kingdom of heaven. Okay. So they're still, and we've been told that Joseph Smith like had seen the telestial kingdom. If people saw how good the worst section of heaven is, they would kill themselves to get there. So it's still supposed to be like this wonderful place. But apostates or like sons of perdition who deny the Holy Ghost, they deny the truth that they knew fully, they would be sent to outer darkness. And we've even had people on before, women that are told that their souls will turn into nothingness. So the men get to just be out in eternal darkness forever, but the women, their souls aren't even worthy of being in the eternities, and they're in nothingness if they leave.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Scientology would be similar, that a WOG would just be someone who's never gotten into Scientology.
Yeah.
And a former member would be a suppressive person or an SP. And an SP is much worse than a WOG. Yeah. Scientologists can have WOG friends. They can work, they call them WOG jobs, which is it's working for a company that's owned by a non-Scientologist. It's called a WOG job.
Okay.
That's funny.
Scientologists are allowed to associate with WOGs. They're allowed to date WOGs. They're allowed to marry WOGs, but you cannot even talk to an SP.
Okay, and
So
that seems similar to the FLDS in that, we were out of the community doing work and, doing construction jobs and things like that, but we weren't supposed to even talk to someone that had left the church. And I think it was like you said, Aaron, they didn't want us to be influenced by those wicked people that have left the church because, obviously they could convince us to leave, right?
So I just had a thought. I have to ask you about this, especially because mainstream Mormonism or LDS versus FLDS. So it's the FLDS that refuses the right to talk to former members, but LDS, you can. Here's what's interesting to me. I was going to argue that if Scientology got rid of this forced disconnection policy, it would be sort of a kinder, gentler version of Scientology, which on the one hand might allow it to stop failing so quickly. But then I would argue on the other hand, it would also perhaps accelerate the departure of people outside of Scientology because they would see that these people who you're told are big, bad, evil, suppressive persons are actually not at all. And perhaps it might accelerate people leaving Scientology. I think that's David Miscavige's fear, is that if he allowed Scientologists to be in touch with SPs, he would lose a lot more Scientologists a lot quicker. And yet my question is, how do you think that has played out in the LDS church? Does allowing current members to be in touch with apostates who are family members, does that actually end up having a negative effect on the LDS church itself or not?
That's an interesting question. And it's changed a lot over the last 40 years. So it used to be a lot more divisive. There used to be fewer before the internet, right? Before there was access to so much information. And even in the 90s with me growing up, we were told you're not supposed to look at any outside sources other than the church website, right? You're not supposed to ask questions to outsiders. It was very much still you don't want any outside information. You need, which goes with the bite model, right? And all information just from the church, and you shouldn't look outside that. And then once the internet came to be, so back then too, if people left the church, it was a much bigger deal. And you hear a lot of times where families did kind of shun people, or they were well, we just don't know how to be around you. And there weren't as many family members. If one person had left in a family, it was a very big deal. Yep. When the internet came out and there was all this access to information and people started being able to access problematic church history and other things and be able to have such easy access to sources outside of the church website, more people started leaving. And the family members realized that, having one kid leave and maybe having one relationship, not with one person, could be handled. But when it's multiple kids leaving and it was starting to tear families completely apart, I'd say that even one child is still tearing a family apart, but it started becoming a much bigger thing of people leaving, to where now all the Mormon families that I knew by the early 2000s had at least one family member who had left. Yeah. And so instead of being oh, they're just one person, they're the problem, it became more of this, okay, everybody's having members. We need to not separate families the way before. So we shouldn't shun people. We need to include them. And so the church has changed their reaction to people leaving and changed the openness of, hey, no, it's okay to be open and to invite them back. And I think the church didn't want to separate families. And before, when it was one here or there, it was happening, but they almost didn't know how to handle it any better than what they were. They were well, you believe something completely different. You're not fitting in. Mormonism is very all-encompassing, every aspect of your life. And that's something that even since we left, there's been family members that are super active where it's taken a toll on the relationship for them to realize that we aren't these evil people who are going to try to take them out of the church and find a new way to have a relationship with them, because that's what they're worried of, So it's more family by family now. I think it's helping the church in the sense that I think more people are leaving. If they still wanted that connection with their kids, they were leaving. And it's also hurt them in the aspect of now they're having kids that they're trying to understand. And so then they'll be more open and honest with communication and have more doubts themselves. So I think it's doing both things.
It's doing both. I don't know that it's
kind of tricky.
They also focus a lot on trying to bring people that leave back. So having that relationship and trying to bring them back into the church, I would say, is balancing the fact that it's hurting. It's also helping bringing people back in. So it's kind of right in the middle.
If you don't just cut them off, there's always the hope of bringing them back.
Right.
And so I feel like the church has overall shifted to no, you need to have those relationships so you can bring them back. Yeah. Versus it's easier to just cut off that one arm and move forward with your life in it. And there's just more and more information. So they're having to come right now. The mainstream Mormon church is trying so hard to be more mainstream Christian and kind of get rid of a lot of the things that made them uniquely Mormon. Like we talked about how it's a core tenet of the faith that you're going to be able to become a god and be able to have like your own planet, your own world. That's what 100% we were taught. If you go on their website now, they say, well, that's a mischaracterization. We didn't say you could get your own planets. We said you could become like God and that you'd be able to have your own, like, I can't remember the wording, but they're like skirting around it to try to make it not seem as odd, right? Yeah. Trying to find ways to make it easier or have those lower levels. Like when you're talking about, oh, these are the lower levels. So like most people could still have happy lives in those entry levels of Scientology, right? If they're just getting some self-help and they're right here in the surface level. And right now, a lot of the mainstream Mormon church, even with their missionary programs, they're trying to stay very surface level. Like, do you believe in Jesus Christ and that he's your savior? Yes. Then don't you want to be baptized like him? And they're ignoring like Joseph Smith and polygamy and all these problematic things that you only get into once you're deeper into the doctrine and you've been in the church for a long time. So it's like, can people be happy right here? Yeah, I'd say just as much as any other Christian religion, they can probably be happy right here. And if they never go deeper than that, they're not going to understand the heartache or the separation or the things that other people went through when it wasn't surface level, when you had to be all in, all the way as deep as it goes. Yeah, and I think they're trying to appeal to those people and say, no, you can stay right here and you can be happy. And you don't even really need to know about all that other stuff.
That's interesting. Yep. That is interesting. I wonder, the families that are at the top of the leadership of the Mormon church, because is it like committees? It's like echelons of people? Or is it one guy in charge?
So you have the prophet and he has his first and second counselors. So there's like the presidency and then you have 12 apostles because it's supposed to be set up like Jesus Christ church. So there's the prophet, you have the 12 apostles, and then it's basically just like a big pyramid. You have like the 70s, early 70s, and it just keeps going down and down and down.
But all the way to leadership that are all local, like the bishops and the stake presidents. And yeah, there's definitely a hierarchy.
But there's a big pyramid of men.
So like I was wondering if the men and the families of the men at the highest level, do those families have to have those families experienced? Is it known members of those families being apostates and leaving? Like, is it considered sort of like a shame?
It definitely does happen, yes. And it seems to be
more shameful
and a bigger deal. Something must be really wrong with those people because they had it all, right? They were up there with the most spiritual of people and they were being taught by apostles and prophets, like the most amazing. For them to leave, I mean, there must have been something really wrong, right?
Yeah. Or like I had a friend who was a member of a very prominent, because there's prominent family names, right, within the church that have the pioneer ancestry, who their great grandpa knew Joseph Smith or was Joseph Smith. Like there's all sorts of familial ties and names. But when she went to leave the church, she had one of the prophets had told her grandfather, gave him a blessing and saying, your posterity will be so righteous that you will never have a single member of your posterity will ever leave the church. And she was the first one to leave, 3 generations down. And each of them had like between 5 and 10 kids. And she was the first one to leave. The amount of pressure that there is on staying when you've been told your whole life, your grandpa got a promise, no one's ever going to leave this, and that's a blessing that our family will have. And then when people start leaving, it's a lot of shame and guilt. And then she's like, she knows what she has to do and what her family needs. But there is that pressure of, I'm the first one to leave and I ruined this beautiful promise and, all the things. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Do you feel, well, the reason I asked that is because in Scientology, some people might want to make the argument that, people being declared and families being destroyed and all that stuff, that's not typical. That's atypical of Scientology. And yet when you look at the facts, Scientology has destroyed the families of even L. Ron Hubbard, Tom Cruise, David Miscavige. I mean, Tom Cruise has disowned his daughter Suri because Katie left Scientology. Katie Holmes left Scientology. David Miscavige, I mean, most of his family has left Scientology, and he's disconnected from all of them and tries to destroy their lives. L. Ron Hubbard, oh my God, his family life was an absolute disaster thanks to Scientology's policies. And you go, if Scientology destroys the families of the people at the very, very, very top, it shows you at least that Scientology doesn't have the tools to fix these problems. And I think it goes even further, and it shows you that this is the product of Scientology. This is the end product of a standard Scientology, is destruction of families. It's not an anomaly.
Yeah, and I would say that I think within the mainstream church, most of the people at the very highest levels have been able to proudly say that most of their children have stayed. And even up to this point, I think it is a pride point that the people at the top tend to be able to keep their families in. And so you don't see, or when people leave, it's very quiet.
I was going to say, or at least get them to not openly say that they left, right?
Yes. And so when there is a prominent family and someone leaves, like the Youngs, who got, he got excommunicated for trying to protect children in bishop interviews, which is a whole other topic. But, that was a huge deal that someone from the Young family would outwardly speak. But that's like one of them out of a huge group of prominent Youngs that are out in the media and famous football players and all the things. So I think they try to keep them a lot more hushed if they do leave, or even when someone in the upper does leave at all. Like there was, not super recently, but I want to say in the 90s, one of the 70, like if a member of the 70, which is very high up, right? Because again, we're talking 17.5 million people. So if you're in the top 100 of the leaders, that's massive. And when they would leave the church, it would be like a very small church announcement, or like they would just be replaced. And you kind of had to dig a little deeper to find out, oh no, they actually left the church. But they're not allowed to like talk about it, and they don't really come out about anything. I wouldn't be surprised. Our church has a crazy amount of lawyers. I wouldn't be surprised if they have to sign NDAs.
And this leads me to a question that I have for you. Openly speaking out against Scientology now, we hear rumors that they have ways to go after people that are speaking negatively about them. Do you feel some of that pressure from Scientology still?
Oh, sure. I mean, I just 2-3 weeks ago followed a private investigator 2 hours down to Fort Myers who was surveilling both of my homes. There's a whole website. My name is a website created by the Church of Scientology to discredit
really?
So AaronSmithLevin.com is a website created by the Church of Scientology.
Oh my gosh. Someone had told us we had like a couple comments where they're like, if you're going to talk about Scientology, please be careful. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? Like, we talk about so many different groups all the time. They're like, no, it's a different ball game if you get talking about Scientology. And I'm like, well,
you guys are fine.
I was like, we're not ex-Scientologists.
There's so many ex-Scientologists speaking out. They have their hands full as it is.
Perfect.
So they'll harass people. They really, what they're trying to do is get under your skin. They're trying to get into your head. Because at the end of the day, there's really nothing they can do. And that's why I relish showing the world there's really nothing they can do. I mean, me and 10 or 20 of my friends go right downtown to the front doors of the largest Scientology organization in the world every Friday. And we put on a massive protest right outside their doors. And there's not a damn thing they can do about it. I live 5 minutes from that base. They can stick all the PIs on me they want. I don't care. It doesn't get under my skin.
Right. Once you don't believe.
Yeah, exactly. They've already dug up all the dirt they could try to and made up 10 times more of that. So it just doesn't matter. But one thing that people do think that Scientology still does is sue the living daylights out of people. The truth is Scientology hasn't sued anyone in over 20 years. They threaten all the time. But the thing is, Scientology's arrived at a place in this day and age where they simply cannot afford the discovery that would occur in a civil lawsuit, especially a lawsuit that they originated. So there's plenty of lawsuits against Scientology presently. In fact, the firm that is currently spearheading all the lawsuits against the Mormon Church has opened up its doors to lawsuits against Scientology now as well. That's Andrews and Thornton.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I've always said, any law firm willing to take on the Mormon Church, it's a walk in the park taking on Scientology.
Yeah, because the Mormon Church has so much money and some really good lawyers. So yeah, if they're willing to take a stab at the Mormon Church, I'm sure they'll be able to take care of whatever they need to.
Yeah. Depending on how much Scientology content you guys do, you might get some mean tweets from Scientology's dedicated troll accounts. Even journalists these days who write about Scientology will get a bunch of mean tweets from Scientology, maybe some strongly worded letters to their bosses or something like that. But
well, now we have a new goal. So we have to keep going on Scientology until we get a couple mean tweets. We'll make that our goal.
We do get mean things from other people in different groups. Even some of these really small fundamentalist Mormon groups will get some messages about, hey, you know what? Polygamy is not bad like you say it is, and things like that. And try to, I don't.
So it's how you know you're doing something right.
Yeah, when you start getting those, you're pushing some buttons.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right,
man.
Well, thank you, Aaron, so much for being here, man. I feel like I know so much more about Scientology, and I know there's a lot more to learn. But thanks for giving us the quick nutshell of what it's all about.
And then obviously for our viewers, I know you have a much bigger platform than we do, but if anybody is just barely hearing, Aaron has, Growing Up in Scientology on his YouTube channel, lots of information, I'm sure, over there as well.
Well, we run a foundation, a 501c3 called the SPTV Foundation. By the way, SP is what they call ex-Scientologists. And so SPTV, SP Television is kind of a term that was created by one of my viewers to describe all the ex-Scientologists who put up content on YouTube.
Okay.
So we have the SPTV Foundation that helps people who are escaping from Scientology, who are experiencing the effects of familial disconnection and fair game. And, oftentimes people leaving, they're losing their jobs, they're losing their housing, they're losing their friends, they're losing their family. And so the SPTV Foundation helps people who are leaving, helps them get a place to live, get set up with good job, transportation, job training. We can get them back to their home. Sometimes these Scientology workers, they're brought to the U.S., they overstay their visas. They're being trafficked for labor. They make $47 a week. They have no way to get home, even if they wanted to escape. So, I use my channel to promote the foundation, and we've been able to help a lot of people. So just, encouraging people to watch the content. And if people want to check out the SPTV Foundation, they can look at our website as well.
Yeah,
absolutely. We'll leave all the links below. Yeah, for sure. Okay, wait. So what does SP stand for?
Suppressive person.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Suppressive person. Yes. I've been learning so many new terms today that I'm like, man, this is how other people feel. They're always like, Mormons have so many acronyms. It's like FHE and the MTC and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, but I have all those in my head already. So learning somebody else's acronyms might take me a minute.
But what's funny is on Twitter, SPTV is Sony Pictures Television.
Oh, yeah.
So you're like, darn it, they got it before us. Well, thank you so much again for being here. We really appreciate it. And man, like I said, there's so many more similarities. I mean, we talk about that all the time, but there's more similarities than differences in these high control groups. And so we just appreciate you coming on to talk about it with us.
Thanks for having me on. Let's do it again sometime.
And thanks to all of our viewers for being here with us today. We really look forward to talking with you soon.
Talk to y'all soon.